Thank you so much for coming here. If it's your first time here at Art League, my name is Zaira Castagnano, and I am the curator and exhibition manager here. And it's been such an absolute pleasure working with Renata, and we are so thrilled to have you and to have her here to discuss her exhibition, Can't See the Forest, in detail. So without further ado, Renata Lucia.
So thank you. I want to sincerely thank you all for coming today. And thank you to Art League Houston for letting me have this exhibition and your support, and especially Zaira and Jenny Ash. Thank you so much. So let's see if I can work this properly. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about my inspiration, the Wildwoods drawings and meaningful science related to that, the Sylvan transformation prints and the process for those, and then what's next for me artistically. And then in a mini Earth Day celebration, I'm going to pivot to share information on some local organizations and the upcoming City Nature Challenge. I'll give you a QR code that you can use for all the resources I'm going to be mentioning throughout this presentation. And then I'll take questions and give away some native plant seeds. So please hold your questions to the end. I'm going to go pretty fast so we get through everything. So in case someone here doesn't know me, as an artist, a naturalist, and an environmental advocate, my practice is rooted in regular engagement with the environment through plein air studies, voluntary work for local organizations, naturalist excursions, and ecological study. As an artist, I'm trying to shift aesthetics to a wilder landscape, inspire wonder, and encourage local ecosystem conservation. So Can't See the Forest is an exhibition of ecological drawings, printing plates, and collagraph prints that are equal parts warning, love letter, and documentation delivered in trees. The title's borrowed from the phrase, "Can't see the forest for the trees," to highlight how focusing on the wrong details can lead to failure to notice what's important as an ecological whole, as well as, of course, referencing trees, both present and missing. So this series began during the COVID-19 pandemic when I lost my then day job and had the gift of time to become a naturalist and enter a new phase of my art making. This transformation can be told through books. I learned my favorite character in the novel The Overstory was inspired by a real-life scientist named Suzanne Simard. After I read Suzanne's 2021 book, Finding the Mother Tree, I doubled down on nature themes and art and increased my knowledge and interactions in our local environment by joining the local Texas Master Naturalist program, which I'll talk about later. Simard is best known for her forest ecology research on communication and interactions between trees and plants via fungi and roots called mycorrhizal networks. This includes interspecies cooperation, mother tree support of seedlings, and a dying tree's intentional transfer of up to 40% of its carbon to living trees around it. So this knowledge made me more attuned to scenes like these two trees from Brazos Bend State Park. It also made me feel more poignant about others, like this scene of a dead tree on the right, held upright by a living tree at Russell Farm Art Center, close to Dallas-Fort Worth area, in this piece called Love. And fun fact, I couldn't get Whitney Houston's song, "I Will Always Love You," out of my head when I was drawing this. On the right is a quote from Simard from a New York Times article called "The Social Life of Forests." It's really great. It resonated with me, and I think gives more meaning to these works. Western culture, in particular, often consigns plants to a liminal space between object and organism. It is precisely this ambiguity that makes the possibility of plant intelligence and society so intriguing and so contentious. I was also thinking about the phenomena of pareidolia, by which we see faces and patterns, like in this bark detail, and exacerbated by pairs of tree holes and classic tree anthropomorphization, like the way we identify the trunk with the human body, like Ents in Lord of the Rings. And there's chairs. Okay. These are all portraits where I've rendered realistic likenesses. For example, this is what a gall and an oak twig actually looked like. In the Master Naturalist training program, I was very aware that anthropomorphizing did not fit with what I was learning. At the same time, other artists who knew what I was working on were recommending the book The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wollenben, which led me to a big controversy in science writing. His book had scientific community backlash due to factual errors, but mostly due to extreme anthropomorphizing, much of which the public loved, along with its relatable tone. However, when asked if anthropomorphism was a danger, he replied, "Not for the trees," which I liked. I prefer this quote from Meldon Sheldrake, that anthropomorphism is usually thought of as an illusion that arises like a blister in soft human minds, untrained, undisciplined, unhardened. There are good reasons for this. When we humanize the world, we may prevent ourselves from understanding the lives of other organisms on their own terms. But are there things this stance might lead us to pass over or forget to notice? And for me, this quote harkens back to the trouble that Suzanne Simard had with getting her research accomplished and accepted. Best of all, though, are these quotes from Robin Wall Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass on animacy. The animacy of the world is something we already know, but the language of animacy teeters on extinction, not just for native peoples, but for everyone. And then, in speaking about the English language, the arrogance of English is that the only way to be animate, to be worthy of moral respect and concern, is to be human. So I've come to understand that the danger is with ascribing a value that's a human-centered value that implies all other beings are a means to human ends. And so I strive to pay attention to that and think about it as I'm working on these things. So this series began with this portrait of an intriguing tree in my Sharpstown neighborhood. You may or may not have noticed that the connecting thread of all the Wildwoods drawings in this exhibition is an ecologically important but overlooked microhabitat within the trees, which is tree holes or hollows. So there are ongoing studies of this in Europe and to a lesser extent in the Pacific Northwest, but not here. In an urban setting, trees and branches with holes are sometimes removed for safety reasons, but most often for aesthetic purposes, even though this natural stage of tree life and death reverberates through the environment. Choosing to keep even a portion of a dead tree or dying tree around rather than sending it to a landfill and grinding out a stump or leaving some dropped branches on the or leaves can have a big environmental impact. So now we'll take a quick survey, quick tour of tree holes via my drawings. So tree holes all start with a tree wound with bark damage followed by rot. They can be due to tree trimming or natural limb loss. So this was trimming. They can be due to structural defects like this example of splitting. This is one of the more fanciful drawings of fungi inside the hole, though the bark and the hole are accurate themselves. This is an example of butt rot at the base of a tree. Damage from other trees, like this remnant of a giant scraping wound, as found in the Houston Arboretum. And then lightning damage, which causes tree holes, which I've seen, but I haven't found one that I wanted to draw yet. So I thought I'd mention it, but show you what all these drawings were made of, which is exactly this: a mechanical pencil, a small watercolor kit, where the watercolor is used in service of the drawings, a dagger brush, and synthetic paper that highlights the mark making. And then there's wind throw. We're all familiar with downed trees after a storm, but sometimes the trees survive this. So this scene is the upended root view of this same tree, which continued to grow, laying on its side. And whatever this hole is. So the more you look at tree holes, the more obvious it becomes that trees survive a lot of damage, and it's because they're already partially dead. This led me to a really interesting article on tree mortality. For instance, a live conifer is only about, in a live conifer, only about 10% of the cells are actually alive. The leaves, the inner bark, the ray cells. But some processes associated with dead trees begin while the tree is still alive. For example, fungi are already at work rotting the woody material. The animals excavate the dead parts of living trees. In contrast, a dead tree or log in an advanced state of decay may include a considerable number of living cells. As much as 35% of the biomass may be live fungal cells alone. So that was 10% alive while it was alive, and 35% alive in fungal cells when it's dead, which I thought was really amazing and beautiful. So this tree has a mushroom fruiting from its heartwood and was found in Fairfield Lake State Park. This piece inadvertently ended up highlighting the documentary aspect of these works with a huge environmental problem in Texas of ongoing development. So this was a 5,000-acre state park south of Dallas, opened in 1976, but was only leased to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. The actual owner, a private power company, sold the park in 2023 to a private developer, and construction has already begun to turn the former park into a high-end gated subdivision with multi-million-dollar homes, a golf course, and restaurants. So, fun fact to know, only about 90% of the land in Texas is publicly owned. And the latest figure I could find, which was apparently based on 1991 data, listed us as 45th in the nation for public land versus private land. So really not very good. It's a very precious resource. But I digress from tree holes. So, of course, animals use the hollows as habitats, including mammals, amphibians, snakes, and insects. And this is the original birdhouse. There are the primary nesters who excavate and the secondary nesters who exploit existing holes. A master naturalist lecture on Winter Storm Uri included a bit on bluebird mortality, mentioning that populations had greatly improved by use of nesting boxes, but they would have survived the storm better in tree holes. And these are just the dry habitats. Because tree holes also result in tiny ponds and hanging aquaria. Water collects in above ground root depressions and some trunk and branch holes, which is a type of phytotelma, which translates as plant pond, which are aquatic microhabitats. So it's not surprising to find soil at ground level, but in the beautifully named process of stem flow, rain carries dust, plant matter, insect frass, and other materials into the holes, creating soil-like matter inside the trees. And all this means that there are freshwater microorganisms. Yep. There are freshwater microorganisms living inside the wet tree holes. So I'm going to run a little video in the lower left here. I think. Maybe I had it. Where'd it go? Oh no! Whoops. Sorry. Technical difficulty. Oh, there it is. Okay. I think. Is it showing? It's not showing. No. Aw. I don't know why it's black. Okay. Well, that's disappointing. But trust me, there were little microorganisms swimming around. You can just barely see a little strip. I don't know what's gone wrong here. Sorry. But I was the only person who brought my own water sample to a Houston Arboretum under that microscope event, where I was helped with identification of the microorganisms. And yes, I looked at other samples at home too. It was like bird watching. It was really fun. But so that's it for the wildwood drawings and their secrets. So now I'll talk about the prints, most of which came later than the drawings. So the Sylvan Transformation series forefronts disturbance, featuring trees transformed to ubiquitous packaging materials, to collagraph printing plates, and then to framed images on paper. And I thought about doing this when I was holding a package and imagining all the things in the world that had happened to bring this package to me as a package holding something else, and wondering what remained of the life it once held. Process and image-wise, I was inspired by the prints of Krishna Reddy, who was an Indian master printmaker, sculptor, and teacher, who was considered a master intaglio printer and known for viscosity printing. And I also studied collagraph instruction from the 70s, including YouTube resources and this complete collagraph book, which is super if you're interested in this, as well as at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston Glatzell School of Art with guidance from the instructor and fantastic printmaker, Leif Johnson, who is here today. Thank you so much. Yay. So a collagraph is usually a collage of materials with different textures adhered to a printing plate, made of thin wood or cardboard. In my case, most of the plates are just carved packages. In one instance, I glued packages to another, and in another instance, I used matte medium to create some high spots, but everything else is just a carved plate. Then they're varnished and ready for the printing processes. You can see an unfolded printer cartridge box here on the left before carving, including spots where the packaging glue had to be worked into the image. It's just the way it was as part of the box, and then the printing outcome on the right. Once the plate is ready, it's printed with intaglio or a combination of intaglio and relief called viscosity printing. The single color prints were printed intaglio style, where the ink, which is the blue spots in this case, are pushed into the recesses or the valley of the packaging printed plate. And the surface is wiped clean and then printed onto paper. Because you need pressure to get the ink back out of those valleys, we print it with a printing press. Oh, come on, there we go. In relief printing, the ink, red in this case, is just rolled over the top of the plate, the hills, and you could print this by hand. But in viscosity printing, the multicolored prints in this show, a loose intaglio ink was pushed into the valleys while a stiff relief ink was rolled over the top. And by loose and stiff, I mean like the textural differences between ranch dressing versus like natural peanut butter, right? And those viscosity differences keep the inks from interfering with each other. So you can get this kind of complex multicolored image. And all the colors are printed on the press at the same time in one go. Oh no, the bag of boxes. Okay. When I'm creating the, when I'm creating these prints, unless I have a really exciting box shape, I tend to start with a tree image in mind first and pick out a box that I think will make a suitable printing plate for my bag of boxes. I do especially like the boxes that have windows and the way they make voids in the image, which I also find meaningful as a symbol of the environment interrupted. I'll start with a drawing on the box and then start incising the design with a tool like a Whistler's twist here. Each box reacts differently, and that's part of the fun of this process. They are small, but you can see in the print on the right how well these little lines can hold that ink. For bigger areas, I'm cutting or carving into the box and peeling up a thin layer of the package, or in some cases, 2 layers of the package. When I get carried away and cut through the box, then it ends up getting reinforced with tape. But they are generally surprisingly sturdy. Then they get shellacked as on the left. The image on the right shows you a shellacked plate that's all inked up and wiped and ready for printing for single color. And here's another view of the plate inked in a single color for intaglio printing on the left. And because it's single color and it was destined for just 11 by 14 inch paper, it can be printed in my home studio at Wright on a tiny press there, kind of on the middle upper right hand side. Probably can't see because it's too small, like everything else in there. However, most of these works that include the viscosity prints required more space, and they were printed at Glassell in Open Studio. And they also require larger rollers than I have for that color roll. Technical difficulties, there we go. Here's a setup example for that on the left, and on the right, you can see the beginning of one of those what's called a split fountain roll for multiple colors to create a color gradation for a sunset effect. So once the ink is on the bottom and the top of the plate, it's time for printing this plate on the paper. And then the plate and the rollers have to be cleaned to start over again. The circumference of that roller has to be large enough that portions of the roller that contacted the plate don't make contact again. I don't know if you can see it on the screen or not, but it's picked up ink everywhere it touched the plate, right? And you don't want it to put that back down. So the plate and the roller have to be cleaned. And so this is a lot of process for me physically. And one of the reasons why I don't have large editions of any particular print, besides the technical challenges of editioning this kind of process. So most of the prints in the exhibition are monoprints, so one of one. Although sometimes I have different colorways of a print that's still a monoprint. Or if there's an edition, it's generally an edition of 2. I should mention that the sunsets depicted in the viscosity prints offer both end-of-day comfort and a warning of impending climate crisis. And of course, the show included a big installation of many of the collagraph plates that I used. And now you'll understand what those are. If you don't mess around with viscosity printing and you just use single color, This is actually a fairly easy, inexpensive, rewarding way to print if you have access to a press. So that's it for this series. Next up, I'm pleased to share I'll be in an environmentally themed show at San Jacinto College South this fall with Kathy Kaiser, Ellen Ray, Heather Johnson, and Cindy Clement. And I'm working on drawings and paintings around the theme of solastalgia, which is a new term coined for the lived experience of negatively perceived environmental change. And there will be paintings too around things like Brownwood subdivision and possibly more. And there'll be more information on that to come in social media. So that's it for the art. Oh, it is 24. Yeah. All right. Sorry. Thank you for noticing that. It is this fall, this October. Yeah. Okay. I'm having a little bit of trouble reading this on the screen, and I have to read it because I can't remember anything, and it's a lot of words that I'm trying to share. Okay. So now I'm going to switch over to the mini Earth Day celebration portion. And I'm going to talk about 3 groups I'm a member of and then some other groups that provide great resources. And I'm not just a member of the Native Plant Society of Texas. I'm also the state admin, working remotely part-time for our state office. We have almost 5,000 members and over 30 chapters across the state committed to protecting the Texas environment through conservation, research, and utilization of native plants. I'm so honored to share that we have the executive director of the organization, Meg Inglis, here from Dripping Springs, Austin, who traveled along with Claire Sorensen, the head of our NICE Plant Partners Committee. Claire is there. Yes, thank you. And the former Austin chapter president. And we also have Linda Knowles, our immediate past president here of the Houston, of the state and Houston chapter, and my coworker Linda Foss. So thank you. So NIPSOT is in the house. If you have any native plant questions today, we have you covered. So thank you all for coming. The Native Plant Society, and Susan Conity, I'm going to get to you in a minute. You are also in many organizations. Thank you. The Native Plant Society has so many beneficial programs and services, but here are a few that you may be interested in off the bat. The Houston chapter has free monthly meetings open to the public at the Houston Arboretum on the 3rd Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. with super interesting lectures on different topics. There are always native plants and seeds to take home if you want them. There's also an annual day-long seminar event and plant sale each fall called Wildscapes, which is fantastic. Donna Perkins can attest to this. They have local classes, including gardening for birds and garden design with native plants in a program called Native Landscape Certification Program, which Linda Foss administers. It sounds like that's for landscape architects, but it's not. It's for everyone. The state and the organization both give garden grants you can look into if you're interested in having a group garden somewhere, including monarch garden grants. And the state website includes a native plant database. Oh, I should have switched. Sorry. Haha. The state website includes a native plant database that makes it easier than ever to figure out what you would want to grow and how, and an invasive plant database to help you identify problematic plants. We also have nurseries that participate here locally in our NICE partner program. And I've got those and other resources listed in the references that I'll be sharing at the end. The Native Prairies Association of Texas is another great organization that I'm a member of that acquires and protects native prairies, assists landowners, does restorations, and provides education. I can switch back to this. They meet at 6:30 to 8:30 on the 4th Wednesday of the month and have very interesting lectures and events like moth nights on local prairies. And even Garth enjoys mothing. He likes moth nights. And I should mention that both NPAT and NIPSOT, the Houston chapters, have these events both in person and virtually. So it's really easy to attend, and they're open to the public. I'm also a member of the Texas Gulf Coast, the Texas Master Naturalist Gulf Coast chapter, as are many of the other NIPSOT folks in the room. So the Texas Master Naturalist Program is designed to develop a core of well-informed volunteers who provide education, outreach, and service dedicated to the beneficial management of natural resources and areas within our communities. And it's sponsored by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. It's a big time commitment, but it's a great education on all aspects of our environment here, not just plants, but wildlife, weather, history, archaeology, soil, conservation efforts, etc. And it opens you up to meaningful volunteer experiences you wouldn't necessarily be qualified otherwise. So if you have any questions about that program, you can ask me later and I'll provide links to it. And there are so many others that you can learn about or join or support that are in Houston. The Nature Conservancy is a global environmental nonprofit group that's been protecting land and water in Texas since 1964. And I'm pleased to say we have my friend Daisy Perez here in the back from the Nature Conservancy. And Susan Conity, who's a steward of the Nash Prairie. He's still my heart. And other places as well. And I cannot tell you the joy I felt exploring the Brazos Woods Preserve in West Columbia with Susan. Fantastic. So thank you so much. The Coastal Prairie Conservancy, which is formerly the Katy Prairie Conservancy, which also works to preserve coastal prairies, wetlands, farms, and ranches is here. And they have a great grow out program where they can send you seeds to grow out to larger plants and then give back to them to restore. You grow them and you give them back and they plant them in the prairies to help restore them. They have a native seed nursery. They have seed collecting trips with Lan Shen, who is a fantastic teacher. You might think, I'd like to do that, but I don't know about it. There are resources to help you learn. And actually, Susan is also fantastic for that as well. Let's see. Houston Audubon has field trips, a local native plant nursery, and can help you appreciate how special this area is for birds. I shouldn't leave out the Bayou Land Conservancy either, and there may be others that I've forgotten, haven't included, but bringing it back to trees, I'm also going to give you links to Trees for Houston, which periodically gives away free native trees in case you need to replace something you cut down, and they have volunteer opportunities. And then finally, a link to the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation for info on why it's important to leave your leaves. And I know that was a lot, but I do want to tell you about something else that's coming up in 6 days that's easy, it's fun, and it's meaningful, and you can do it with just your phone and a little time outside. The City Nature Challenge runs from April 26th to the 29th when we come together with over 600 cities worldwide on all continents to see how many wildlife observations we can gather. Every photo or audio recording you submit helps scientists better understand the biodiversity of our cities and further vital research around the globe. You find any wild plant, animal, or other evidence of wildlife. So that can be feathers, mushrooms, shells, bird calls, anything. Take a picture of it or record the sound and upload it to an app called iNaturalist. You can use the app to help you identify the observations or leave it for others who will ID it as part of this challenge. And that's it. This data is actually very important for science. This crowdsourcing, which I know the artists know how strong that can be, is an example of what we call citizen science. So it's like a nature census count. And it's fun, like playing Pokemon Go, if that's something you ever did. And you can use iNaturalist any time of year to report wildlife and learn how to ID what you have growing or happening around you. But April 26th through 29th is a great time to start. Houston places among the top of the participating cities of this worldwide every year, which I think is pretty amazing. If you're the competitive sort, though, you'll see a problem here with this list that we cannot abide. In spite of being ahead of Dallas in species and number of participants in 2023, we lost to them in number of observations. I love Dallas, but that's just wrong. I'll give you a link to the City Nature Challenge info and hashtags you can follow about this on Instagram. And just like everything else in this presentation, you can always reach out to me afterwards if you have any questions. Okay, so I'm going to rest on this beach image for a minute. but I'm going to talk about our whole Houston-Galveston area for a sec. Here's the most important thing that I should probably switch to my paper. It's easy when we get caught in traffic, driving on our freeways, driving by bayous that have been channelized into cement drainage ditches, or driving by the latest developments in our neighborhoods, to think that our area is just ugly concrete, cars, and buildings, and that nature is something that happens somewhere else. But we live someplace truly special. This area has been occupied by humans for over 12,000 years. We live on the unceded ancestral lands of the Acokisa tribe of the Atacapa people and the Karankawa people, and we must remember and respect that. We live at the convergence of the Mississippi and Central Flyways, 2 of the 4 flyways for all birds migrating between North and South America. It's still one of the most ecologically diverse major urban areas in the country. We're home to the imperiled Great Coastal Prairie ecosystem, once 65 million acres in just Texas, and now down to a precious 1%. We have forests, prairies, savannas, bayous, bottomlands, and coastlines, and it is wondrous. And I hope you'll consider learning more about it through some of these local programs, which will teach you concrete ways to take actions to protect it. So happy Earth Day. Let's make every day Earth Day. And all the references in this presentation are at this link. If you want to take a picture or if you want to ask me for it afterwards. It'll give you info on free Black-Eyed Susan and Maximilian sunflower seeds that I'd like to offer you. You can plant now for late summer blooms. I'd wait until after the storm tonight. Or you can bomb an empty lot with them. Or even if they don't come up, just feed a few native critters. And with that, that's it. Are there any questions?
If you have a question, it would be helpful to use this mic because we are recording it, and that way it translates to the video as well. So if you'll raise your hand, I'll walk over with it and we'll just go from there.
Or have I overwhelmed you with facts and drawings and prints?
This is just great. I think we should present this again somewhere else, you know. And just...
Well, thank you. It is recorded, so it can be shared. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey.
Yes.
Would you go back to your very first slide? The one that said Western culture in particular. I'm a teacher. I could use my teacher voice. Western culture in particular often consigns plants to
The liminal space between object and organism.
It is precisely this ambiguity that makes the possibility of plant intelligence and society so intriguing and so contentious. Could you explain that to me? There's a few too many 3-syllable words in it.
A few too many what words?
3-syllable.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know liminal. I don't know what liminal means.
A liminal space is a transitional space. This hallway where my show is actually kind of a liminal space. An elevator is a liminal space. So it's saying it's bumping up against the idea of, is it an object or is it a living organism, right? And so plants, we don't tend to think about plants as having family relationships or relationships with friends or helping each other or things like that. But that is what is really fascinating about that scientist that I was referencing, Suzanne Simard. And if you look at that, there's going to be a link to something called The Social Life of Forests on the New York Times that's shared on the references, and it will really go into that. It's a great article.
I really enjoyed all the anthropomorphism and animacy slides that you had. That was really
Thank you. And very hard to say. Not good at saying it. Yes.
That former state park south of Dallas that's become a
Fairfield Lake State Park.
What state park?
Fairfield Lake State Park.
Fairfield Lake State Park. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and somebody might ask, are there other parks in that situation? And there was a list, the Houston Chronicle did a list, and I think it was about 15 state parks that are leased, but most of them are leased from other state entities, but there is one that is also leased from a power company. So it could conceivably happen to that one. They don't think there's any plans for it, but Texas Parks and Wildlife doesn't own it. Yes.
Can I ask what power company?
I don't know, actually. That's a great question. But there are articles on it. If you, for Fairfield State Park or the other park, either one, either of them. Yeah. So like the Houston Chronicle or the are really online, because there was really a big to do, right? Because they really tried to save. It was a beautiful park. It was huge. Tried very hard to save it. There were a lot of permutations, but you can find the sad history of that. Yes.
Where do you like to go within this area? Like, what are some of your favorite places?
Any place Susan Conatee will take me or meet me, including Nash Park and the Brazos Woods Preserve, which reminded me so much, which is actually a Nature Conservancy property that's not open all the time, but I was lucky to, or really to the public, but I was lucky to go for plein air work. It reminds me so much of the areas that I grew up in, which is like 288 South, Dallas, Freeport. Yes. Yeah. So Columbia Bottomlands. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
And when does she do this? The National Prairie Preserve and the Brazos Woods Preserve in Missouri privately owned by the Nature Conservancy. Right. So there is no public access.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that the Nature Conservancy doesn't like people to see their preserves. I can give you a tour of any of these. Give you my contact information whenever you would like to come down to do wildlife watching or something. Give you a call. I live 6 miles from both of these preserves. I can get you in the access and give you a tour. I can give you what you can do safely, especially in National Prairie. You'll see it where you're safe, and you can do that. We are not a recreational place. We are not a park, refuge. You can't bring your dog. You know you're there, and when you leave, and that kind of thing. Safety, and it's not a park.
Right.
Nature Conservancy's mission is science and education and preservation. But we do like to show people what we have down there and teach people what we have and what we were saying, how wonderful the area is. More than happy to get you access to that place.
And that is a generous offer. I would absolutely take her up on that and call me so that I can tag along. Right. So sometimes the plein air group that I'm a part of will go to these, get permission to go to these places. It's wonderful. And then for public access, one of my favorite places is Brazos Bend State Park, too. There's so much to explore. The Houston Arboretum, you know, sometimes I have accessibility issues, and it's of a size and it's flat that I can always pretty much manage, which is beautiful. And really, I haven't explored Memorial Park enough, quite frankly. Yeah, there's so much happening. So those are 3 places that have public access.
The Discovery Nature Center.
Yeah, I do go there sometimes. It's smaller. It's lovely. Yeah.
There's an iNaturalist tour you can do.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Linda. And that's a great point, because that's another way to add interest to any of these trips, is to look on iNaturalist and see what's been identified there. There's also something called eBird. You can look and see what birds have just been identified there. It can really add fantastic. Yes.
I want to recommend, if you're down in Missouri County, National Prairie is just south of Brazos Bend, and also Missouri County has amazing parks. One of them in West Columbia is called Hanson Riverside Park.
Okay.
And it's just being redone. It's on the Salmon Arc River. Trails through the Columbia Bottomlands. And it's going to have primitive camping on it. It has a pavilion and a wetland demonstration garden in it. Boardwalks. Park. And Mohawk is another one. Park in Missouri.
Wonderful.
Because it sounds like for several of your inspirations, you traveled to see, to get your inspiration. And because you had a particular purpose in mind, a message you wanted to send, how did you, like, I had the question right in my head and getting it out is hard. You know, this is a huge process. So you can't sit in front of a tree that you want to draw for 3 days. You've got to go home at some point. So how did you manage that? Did you take photos? Do you go by memory? How did you manage that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, and yes, some of the initial drawings were done as part of an artist residency at Russell Farm Art Center, which is, like I said, south of the DFW area. And I did do a lot of drawing there on site, but I'm not the best. That's called plein air. I'm not the best at plein air. I think that I strive to capture this embodied experience in all of my works, works that aren't here even. So it is important for me to go to the place and experience it and hopefully get that into the work. But my final works are generally done in studio. And so that includes like plein air references, it includes photographs as well. So generally drawings, pictures, memory, yeah. But it's all based in that experience, that engagement.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much again for joining us. Please feel free to help yourselves to some refreshments. Don't forget to grab your seeds. Thank you so much, Renata, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.